Bible Study Guide Day 37, Exodus 22-24. In chapter 22, God lays out laws for the protection of property and restitution for damages. He begins by stating that if someone steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters or sells it, they must repay 5 oxen for 1 ox and 4 sheep for 1 sheep. However, if the thief cannot afford to pay, they will be sold into slavery to work off their debt. This shows that God values the property of others and expects it to be protected. God also addresses the issue of someone's property being damaged or lost while in the care of another person. If a borrowed animal dies, is injured, or lost, the borrower must make restitution for it. This law not only protects the lender's property but also promotes responsibility and accountability among God's people. God also commands that if a fire breaks out and destroys someone's property, the one who started the fire must make restitution for the damage. This law promotes caution and carefulness in handling potentially dangerous situations. God also addresses issues of social responsibility in this chapter. He commands that if a man seduces a virgin, he must pay the bride price and marry her. This shows that God values the sanctity of marriage and holds men accountable for their actions. God also commands that if a father refuses to give his daughter in marriage to a man who has seduced her, the seducer must still pay the bride price. This law not only encourages men to take responsibility for their actions, but also protects the rights of women. God speaks about the treatment of foreigners, commanding his people to show compassion and not mistreat them. He reminds them that they were once foreigners in Egypt and experienced mistreatment, so they should treat others with kindness and empathy. God also shows concern for the poor and vulnerable in society. He commands that if a widow or fatherless child is mistreated, he will hear their cry and bring judgment upon the oppressors. This shows God's heart for justice and his care for those who are marginalized. If the needy ask for a loan, God commands his people to lend to them without charging interest. This promotes generosity and compassion towards those in need, rather than greed and exploitation. In chapter 23, God continues to lay out laws for his people in this chapter, focusing on justice and mercy. He commands them to not spread false reports or join with the wicked to pervert justice. This shows that God values truth and righteousness. God also speaks about the Sabbath and how it is to be observed as a day of rest and worship. He reminds his people of their deliverance from slavery in Egypt and commands them to show mercy to their servants by allowing them to rest on the Sabbath as well. This shows God's concern for the well-being of his people and their relationships with others. God also commands his people to observe 3 annual festivals: the Festival of Unleavened Bread, the Festival of Harvest, or First Fruits, and the Festival of Ingathering, or Tabernacles. These festivals are times for God's people to come together in worship and celebration, remembering his faithfulness and provision. They also serve as reminders of their identity as God's chosen people and their dependence on him. God promises to send an angel before his people to protect them and lead them to the promised land. He assures them that if they listen and obey this angel, he will be an enemy to their enemies and oppose those who oppose them. This shows God's faithfulness to his people and his desire for their protection. God warns his people not to bow down to other gods or make any covenant with the inhabitants of the land they are entering, but to destroy their altars and idols. This shows God's desire for his people to remain faithful and exclusive in their worship of him. In chapter 24, God confirms the covenant with his people through ritual sacrifices and blood. He commands Moses to bring Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel up to the mountain to worship him from afar. Moses then writes down all the laws and ordinances given to him by God. After reading the book of the covenant to the people, Moses sprinkles blood from the sacrifices on them, symbolizing their commitment and acceptance of the covenant with God. This act also foreshadows Jesus' ultimate sacrifice on the cross, where his blood was shed for our sins and confirmed a new covenant between God and humanity. As the leaders of Israel ascend the mountain and see God, they experience a unique fellowship with him. They eat and drink in his presence, signifying a close relationship and communion with him. God calls Moses to come further up the mountain to receive the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments written on them. Moses goes up the mountain and a cloud covers it for 6 days. On the 7th day, God calls to Moses from within the cloud, confirming his presence and guidance. These chapters remind us of the importance of covenant and fellowship with God. Just as he commanded the Israelites to follow his laws and ordinances, he also calls us to live according to his ways and have a close relationship with him through Jesus Christ. Let us remember the covenant God has made with us and strive to live in obedience and fellowship with him each day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help us spread the word. God bless you.